Some doors are opened by keys, but the most important ones are opened by kindness. What would you do if your last gesture of compassion changed everything? Let us know in the comments section below, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Whitney Holden didn't flinch when the wood split. She pressed her boot down against the frame, twisted the screwdriver out, and stared at the jagged mess of the door jamb like it had insulted her personally. That was the third room this month with rotting trim, and she was running out of money and patience, though truthfully she'd lost the latter sometime last winter when the bank had sent the second foreclosure warning in a single envelope, bold red stamps slashing across the page like a threat. Desert Blue Motel was supposed to be a sanctuary, not a sinkhole. Her dad had built it in the 70s with grit, optimism, and just enough rebellion against the California tourism chains that wouldn't let him franchise. He'd called it a place for people who didn't belong anywhere else. "Out here," he'd said once, arms stretched wide toward the canyon hills, "you don't need a reservation to matter." Whitney was doing everything she could to keep that spirit alive, but bills didn't care about spirit. Inspectors didn't care about legacy. And the new fire safety codes, which came with threats of shutdown and impossible deadlines, didn't care that she was a one-woman operation trying to hold it all together. Her hands were sore. Her hair, thrown up in a crooked bun hours ago, was sticky with sweat and dust. She tugged her flannel sleeve down and wiped her face with it. The wind kicked sand across the lot and rattled the ice machine that hadn't worked in 5 years. The vacancy sign buzzed with its broken neon halo. She hated how loud the silence was these days. The storm had come in hard, sideways rain and slashes of wind that made the highway look like it was dissolving into the dark. She had half a mind to tape a no vacancy sign just to keep anyone from wandering in. Not that it mattered. No one came out this far unless they were broke, lost, or hiding. That's when she saw him. He didn't knock, just stood in the threshold of the motel office, soaked, silent, and staring like he'd already been turned away too many times to expect anything different. His duffel bag was military issue, canvas faded, the edges worn raw, and his boots were caked with desert mud. Whitney looked up from behind the desk. She didn't ask if he had a reservation. "Rule 9, she said, tossing a key onto the counter. "Don't bother with your card. Cash tomorrow, or you can help me fix that busted sink in 8. He blinked. "No thanks, no name." Just a quiet nod as he scooped up the key and turned toward the row of rooms along the west side where the wind hit hardest. She watched him disappear into the dark, like he'd been part of it all along. She didn't ask questions, not because she didn't care. God, she cared too much. But because it had become a kind of law here. You give what you can, and you don't pry. Some guests talked, most didn't, and the ones who wore uniforms or had eyes that flinched at loud noises, they rarely stayed more than a day. But the next morning the stranger was still there. By noon he was fixing the sink. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice had the calm cadence of someone who'd spent years following orders and giving none. Said his name was Caleb. No last name, just Caleb. He had the kind of hands that knew how to take things apart and put them back better. That sink hadn't worked right since 2019, but within an hour the drip was gone, and the seal was cleaner than anything Whitney had managed on her own. "Army?" she asked. He nodded. Means she didn't push. Over the next few days he fixed more than she asked. Rewired a flickering porch light, repaired a broken hinge on room 6's door, reseated the busted picnic bench by the vending machine. He didn't ask permission, he just did it. At night, Whitney would find herself standing outside the office, staring at room 9, wondering why this man, this silent, purposeful stranger, hadn't left. On the 4th day, she brought him a cup of coffee, black, same as he always asked. She sat on the steps beside him. They watched the sun set behind the red hills in silence. "I can't afford to pay you," she said, voice low. "I know," he replied, sipping. "I can't afford to stay open much longer either." He said nothing. A few moments passed before he spoke again, quiet and direct. "Then maybe you shouldn't do it alone." Whitney turned her head, her eyes catching his in the soft orange light. There was something about the way he said it, like he knew too well what it meant to carry weight no one else saw. He didn't answer. The next morning he was gone. Room 9 was empty, the bed made, the coffee cup rinsed and turned upside down in the sink. But on the counter in the front office was a folded piece of paper. No name, just 6 words, scrawled in bold handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone used to signing field reports. "Hold on, help is on its way." Whitney stared at the note, heart heavy, mind racing. Something in her chest tightened, something that wasn't panic or dread, but something else. No, she didn't know what it meant, didn't know if it meant anything at all, but by the time the next storm passed, the desert winds would carry more than just dust. They'd carry the sound of tires, and not just one, an army of them. Whitney didn't realize how quiet the motel had been until Caleb left. The absence wasn't loud, not like when a guest argued at the front desk, or when a pipe burst behind room 3 and she had to shut off the water to the whole west wing. No, this was different. It was the kind of silence that crept in slow, pulled at her collar, and settled in her chest like fog. The motel's rhythm had changed while he was there. She hadn't noticed it then, too caught up in patching drywall and balancing past-due notices, but now, in his wake, the days felt hollow again. Her steps echoed too loudly in the hallway. The coffee in the pot sat longer. Even the air smelled different. Less like sawdust and pine cleaner, more like vacancy. She kept looking toward room 9, half expecting the curtain to shift. It didn't. "Oh!" Instead, her eyes landed on the note he left. "Hold on. Help is on its way." She'd read it at least a dozen times, tracing each word like it might change if she blinked too long. The paper was heavy stock, the kind used for military briefings. No signature, no address. Just a sentence that had no business sticking to her ribs like it did. That evening, as she swept the front walkway for the 3rd time, more out of nervous energy than any real need, her neighbor, Mrs. Rayfield, pulled up in a rusted Crown Victoria. The older woman lowered her window just enough to shout through the gap, "You doing okay, hon?" Whitney straightened. "Fine, ma'am. Your light was off last night. Everything all right?" "Yeah, just fixing some wiring." Mrs. Rayfield squinted, her nose scrunching. She didn't believe it, but she didn't press. "Well, if you need anything, you know where I am. Still making those casseroles. Never know when one hole'll save a soul." "Appreciate it," Whitney replied with a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. After the car rolled away, she returned to the office, where the afternoon light cast long gold shadows across the floor. She sat behind the desk and opened the worn motel ledger. It was mostly blank. A few scrawled names from travelers passing through, most of them truckers or construction crews. No digital system. She'd never had time or money to switch over. Her eyes fell to the note again. Help is on its way. That night, sleep came slowly. She lay in her dad's old room behind the office, wrapped in a quilt that still smelled faintly of cedar. Wind creaked through the window panes, the desert restless under a sky of dying stars. She dreamed of Caleb. Not of his face, but his hands, fixing, turning, steadying, and of the sound of engines in the distance. Low, thunderous, not quite real. In the morning she moved with the same stubbornness that had kept the place running for this long. The front steps needed resealing, so she hauled out a 5-gallon bucket and a trowel and got to work, the sun already burning her neck. An hour in, she heard a vehicle pull into the lot. She looked up, expecting a FedEx truck or maybe one of the utility guys checking on the power lines. Instead, it was a Jeep, matte green, military issue, or close enough. Her hands froze on the trowel. The driver stepped out. Mid-30s, Hispanic, clean-shaven and wearing a flannel over a tan t-shirt that didn't quite hide the tattoos on his forearm. Not threatening, but not lost either. He walked toward her with calm purpose. "You Whitney?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yeah. Name's Torres. I'm a friend of Caleb's." The trowel clattered to the concrete. She didn't speak, didn't move. Just stared, unsure whether to be relieved or afraid. "He told me about this place," Torres continued. "Said you gave him a roof when you didn't have one to spare." "I gave him a room. That's what I do." He smiled a little, then looked past her at the crumbling stucco, the empty lot, the leaning ice machine that had turned into a nesting spot for birds. He said it wasn't just a room, said it reminded him of home, said it deserved to be standing. She blinked hard. "He left." "I didn't even get to thank him." "He didn't want thanks," Torres replied. "He wanted to do something that mattered." She felt her knees weaken, but forced herself to stay upright. "So, what now?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded blueprint. Creases sharp, lines clean. "This is Phase 1, he said. "Structural repairs, code compliance, accessibility updates." Caleb started organizing it before he even left. Whitney took the paper, hands trembling, her breath caught as she scanned the layout, every broken section of the motel accounted for, materials listed, volunteer shifts scheduled. "He didn't tell me," she whispered. Torres nodded. He wanted it to be a surprise. Behind him, another jeep turned into the lot, then another, and another. Within minutes, 6 of them were parked in a row like desert sentinels, each one carrying supplies, people, laughter. Some wore dog tags, others wore worn denim and work gloves, but all of them had the same look Caleb had. A calm, quiet focus. A reason to be here. Whitney stood in the center of it all. She didn't cry, not yet, but something inside her loosened. Caleb hadn't left her behind. He'd left her a beginning.